You call the March meeting of the Trousdale County Planning Commission to order. Madam Secretary, would you call the roll, please?
Heather Banks, present. Coleman, Eddie Dillon, Robert Harper,
Here.
John Kerr,
Here.
Rosalie Mahan, here. David Noller,
Here.
David Thomas,
Here.
Cal Roach,
Here.
Mitch Green. Sorry, bud. Sorry.
I'm late, sorry.
I did.
All right. Next is our minutes. You have had our minutes for several days now and been able to look over those to see if there's any additions, corrections, or anything that needs to be changed about. Anybody got anything that need to bring up about the minutes? One thing you find out when you're in the appellate court or the chancery court, minutes matter, because that's the official record of any meeting. And when we accept the minutes, this will be for February, that becomes the official record of what we did in February. And I'm sure y'all know that, but it doesn't hurt to emphasize that. So, hearing no corrections, additions, or anything,
Make a motion.
have a motion by Mr. Noller to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Bay. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say no. February's minutes are approved. I guess we have any changes to the agenda. Everything's good. All right, so on our agenda tonight, we have a sketch plat approval. This is for a major subdivision by Mary Lynn Hale, 28.92 acres on Highway 25 West, Crenshaw Road and Sulphur College Road. They would like to do 15 lots. This is in the 7th Civil District. I'm sure pretty much everybody knows where this property is down below Mr. Carmen's there as you turn in on Crenshaw on the right side and the left side, going on out until you get to Crenshaw, turning left and going down Crenshaw a little ways. So we'll turn this over to Jim.
So y'all, I think in generality saw this 3 or 4 months ago with a rezoning request, but anyway, so this is made through county court and everything, rezoned to R1, looking at a sketch plat for possibly 16 tracks. Once again, we haven't got all of our soil situated yet. We're a little bit early in the game, so it final may not look exactly like this. Got water out on the highway, water on Crenshaw Road. We're going to be putting a fire hydrant in on Crenshaw Road, which will cover everything except track. What you see is tracks 13, 14, and 15. We only have a 4-inch line down Sulphur College right there. Can't put a fire hydrant on that line. So be glad to try to answer any questions you might have for that.
Okay. So Jim has laid this out for us, told us where the fire hydrant would be, where water is located. Does anybody have any questions for Jim? Yeah.
Just to hear you correctly, you don't have soil samples back yet?
We don't have it all back. This was designed off of a preliminary that the soil scientists gave us. So I think this is close, but there could be some alterations on the preliminary and the final. I mean, we could lose a lot. We're not going to gain a lot, but I mean, we could lose a lot. 2 might have to be combined into 1 or something like that. It could go down in number possibly.
Where are you at? I guess the access for 15 is down here, the curve on Sulphur College.
Yes, more than likely, yes, sir. I think that's where it's going to be at, down in the low end down there.
Okay. Any other questions? Again, this is for sketch plat approval. So I mean, once he gets his soils back and everything, he'll be coming in.
Yeah, we'll be back. We'll be back probably here in the next month and the month following. So that's at least the plan.
Arthur?
Yes.
We are planning on the soils being.
Oh, yes. No, the soils will have to work out or the lots won't be approved, so.
I hate those.
No. We can't make lots in here that doesn't have a soil area. They won't let us do that.
We would never even entertain.
No, that's
anything without
not,
everything.
rules don't let me pull stunts like that, so.
I had mentioned that. I run into them where they were crossing 2 and 3 lots. It's a headache. It's a headache.
Any other questions? All right, Jim. Let's hear from GNRC.
All right, so, again, the property was requested for rezoning back in December. The planning commission heard it to R1. The sketch plat is really a concept plan for design purposes only to understand what's proposed and find out if there's anything of major concern, whether it be topography or access. All the staff comments that were provided earlier have been addressed by the resubmittal, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
You have any questions at this time? Take a minute, think. Yes, sir.
Jim, please, refresh my memory, but it has gone through both readings for the rezoning, correct?
Yes.
Commission.
Yes,
So it is now all.
it is now entirely horrible. Yes, yeah, I think it was originally like 4 different zones, and one of them was R1, but it moved the whole thing into R1.
Okay. No more questions? Any more discussion? If not, do I have a motion? Thomas? I make a motion to approve the sketch plan. Having a motion by Mr. Thomas to approve the sketch plan for us tonight. Do I have a second? Second by Mr. Welch. Any discussion?
I'd like to thank, Mr. Carmen. I think this is the first plat we've had come in, that there wasn't some sort of change that was gonna have to be made to get something approved. I don't know if that's just because it's a sketch plat, but I appreciate having the plat all done and not having
Well,
to make adjustments to
If I
it.
get notes, I try to address them before the meeting gets here, so.
Let's be careful of giving too many compliments.
Get it back again.
Any other discussion, questions, or anything? All right, we do have a motion on the floor to approve this and a second. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say no. Does pass unanimously. Thank you, y'all. Before we move on to our training session, does anybody have anything else to come before the planning meeting tonight? David, where are we on the blasting permits?
So, we're not sitting right now, just got an email back from the county attorney. So we were trying to figure out whether, as far as getting that $100 fee tacked onto it, whether that need to be done as a resolution or as an ordinance. Just received that back. He said, for the new law, it has to be an ordinance. So all I'm doing is coming out of the motion, what kind of zoning bill, I'll use that, taking that forward. So the motion that we sent forward with sending it with a favorable approval will accompany it, and it'll just go for, right now it's a permit, just collecting information. This will make it law and tack a $100 fee to it.
And the purpose of the fee is just to offset the cost for the planning office. It's not anything by any stretch of the imagination, but that's all it's for, is to offset the physical from putting it all on the website, alerting all the entities that we will. Yeah.
They be put out there where they've done got their blast signs up.
Well, as we talked about, there's the opportunity for a lot of blasting to be done in the county over the next several years. Obviously, Jones Brothers is gonna be here for the next 2 to 3 years. Hopefully, they won't be blasting that long. But for the next year and a half, at least, they're gonna be doing a lot of blasting. It's possible that Enbridge, once that gets going, could have some blasting. You never know. You never know. When you start digging, you don't know what you're gonna run into.
This is going to rob.
But in Brownsville County, there's a really good chance. I don't know about on the pipeline, since it's kind of going to following the line of the other, but for the, pump, what do you call it, the, compression station?
Yeah.
And that they're gonna have to do, and then possibly for the, solar panel farm, you know.
The county
I'm
itself.
just saying, there's a possibility that they could have to do some blasting. And the purpose of this is just to be able to alert the entities in Brownsville County and the homeowners. My niece, Penny Sutherland, has just built a home, finishing up, trying to, a house right there off of, I believe that's Laddie Reese, is that
Yeah.
Laddie Reese? And she told me about 2 weeks ago, a representative from Jones Brothers came by and told her that there was gonna be blasting that could cause some structural damage to her house, and it's not even finished yet. And, I mean, I think we just owe it to our citizens to be able to warn them, you know, when, you know, when anybody's blasting. It could be somebody buying the lot beside me on Royal M and wanting to put in a basement and having to blast for that. I'd like to kind of know that in advance, you know. So, I mean, I think it's just, common sense. Yes, sir.
There might actually be the county now that the only options we have for property for building a jail are all gonna have to be improved. The county might actually have to do some blasting to get the site prep for the new jail.
Well, I mean,
So,
if you're building in Travisville County,
Yeah.
our #1 crop is rock.
Yeah.
So there's a really good shot that you're gonna have to do something like that.
but I plan on taking that forward to the full commission. Well, we go to, budget and finance because of the fee, this month, if that chairman takes it up this month. But I'll push it over.
Anybody else have anything to come before us? If not, we will move on into our training session later. Hitting this up.
I will. All right, good evening, everybody. So again, I think we're splitting things up into 30-minute increments, so I hope to take 30 minutes to go through these items. On the second page is kind of the overview of the agenda. In light blue are the items that we covered in the February meeting, legal basis for planning, and the roles and relationships of the governing board, the planning commission, the board of zoning appeals, and for staff. So tonight, I hope to get through the orange items. And those are the comprehensive plans and other plans that the planning commission can use in making and determining their decision. And then going from those planning documents into the regulatory tools, so your zoning ordinance and regulation. And then offer you a few considerations for making your decisions, the questions that you have, and who you might ask of those. So, any questions before I get started? All right. So I know this was a topic that we talked about in February on long-range planning and the length of time it's been since the county has undertaken a long-range or comprehensive planning approach. But really, it's an important management tool, especially for the planning commission. The plans provide that community vision and set forth a path as you consider development requests that come in. Plans typically are a comprehensive plan or a future land use plan. The majority or the components of those are led by the community and provide recommendations for policies, programs, and investments that can guide this body's decisions as well as the county commission decisions for how to guide development or make strategic investments to get to that future state. So comprehensive plans often are comprehensive plans. They can be called general plans. They can be called future land use plans. And then typically a component or either a separate document is your major thoroughfare plan. I believe, Rosalie, we did find it, and do you know the date of it? It was early 1998. I think so. Yeah, so your major thoroughfare plan is really a document that identifies the roads in the network across the county and how you categorize them. And I know this was a discussion that we had started talking about how to change your building setbacks based off the road classification. So your major thoroughfare plan would be that document that outlines how far back if you were to vary your setbacks based off that classification. So next sheet is really just a little bit more information on what a comprehensive plan is. Again, it's really recognizing the physical layout and appearance of the community, but also any sort of aesthetics, economic. It consists of that those policy statements with goals and objectives that are again led or developed out of public input to help understand what it is from a data perspective of what's been happening over the past couple of years or typically look back 10 years and then forward 25 years to understand the trends that may impact the community that needs to be planned for. And then it identified those changes that need to or should be undertaken to achieve that future state, that future mission. So it provides the plan for local land use controls. And so when the Planning Commission, the county commissioners, or the Board of Zoning Appeals makes their decisions, they can refer back to the comprehensive plan or that long-range planning document for the rationale for those decisions. So in Tennessee, the Planning Commission is responsible for adopting and amending that general plan or comprehensive plan for the physical development. The legislative body, so the county commissioners, are not required to adopt the general plan, but in the state of Tennessee, the Planning Commission is required to adopt it. And this is, again, the implementation tools of that long-range plan are going to be your subdivision regulations, the zoning resolution, and any other land development regulations that are adopted by this body or the county commission. Any questions on long-range plans? All right. So moving to major thoroughfare plan, again, it's another long-range plan that looks towards the transportation network in the county. It identifies the location and types of roadway facilities and any other mobility facilities, greenways, sidewalks, et cetera, that are needed to meet that projected long-term growth. It's a regulatory plan for public investment and future improvements. It helps also the Trousdale County is part of the Dale Hollow RPO. The major thoroughfare plan and any long-range plan helps the RPO understand how to budget for and plan for transportation planning across a rural planning organization, which they receive funding from TDOT to do, and also can request assistance from TDOT. So it's really important document that helps get the county some state DOT dollars as well. And again, the major thoroughfare plan can be used as a reference in the zoning ordinance for setbacks, the subdivision regulations requiring any sort of larger lot sizes, access control, etc., depending on those roadway classifications. And it also helps preserve those future corridors. So like the new bridge coming over the river that was 35-year project, I believe, at least. It helps, knowing where those future corridors are desired or preferred to go, helps preserve those and protect
We should have
those.
thought that for 98, it was already talked about. Was it on?
I don't think that,
I mean, they were in the planning stages. They had a meeting when I was principal of the middle school back in the 90s,
I remember that.
where they used our gym to have invited people from all the counties around to come and look at what was projected at that time and everything. So,
Yeah, I'll have to refresh my memory of what, if the county's thoroughfare plan it definitely has existing, but if it included proposed. All right, any questions on like the long range planning elements? Yeah.
The RPO, was it provided by GNRC? Just out of curiosity.
The Dale Hollow RPO, it's actually provided through blanking on there.
Mid-Cumberland.
Not Mid-Cumberland,
Upper Cumberland.
Upper Cumberland Development District. Yeah. Sorry, I just blinked on I know where the building is.
yeah, that
Yeah, I think, was it Mark Dudley? Is the contact there if you have a question on the RPO.
Thank you.
All right, so how do we take that long range plan and put it into practice? And that really is what y'all see often coming through, is subdivision regulations and zoning resolution questions as developments are proposed. So current planning really consists of the review and approval of project and activities for consistency with your adopted plans, but also your development regulations. So the subregs and the zoning ordinance. So that includes when I review or when staff reviews in preparation for the planning commission meetings, we look at the major thoroughfare plan, we look at any adopted long range plans for consistency. And then we review based off your subdivision regulations, your zoning ordinances, and then if you have them or if the community has them, we look at your design review manual for consistency there. So what is a development review? It's really conducted to ensure that adequate infrastructure and basic services are available to support that new development and that they are in compliance with municipal or county's plans, regulations, ordinances, and codes. So it includes evaluating projects and making recommendations for those land development proposals and uses to the Planning Commission, the Board of Zoning Appeals, and the elected bodies. So the Planning Commission has the authority, again, as a reminder, to approve subdivisions, but you make recommendations to the elected body for rezonings. And then you can approve variances to the subdivision regulations. The Board of Zoning Appeals can only approve variances to the zoning ordinance. So what are we reviewing? So the types of documents that are submitted, we just tonight got the sketch plan. For Trousdale County, there are three documents for major subdivisions. That was a subdivision that's over 5 lots. That immediately makes it a major subdivision. So the order is a sketch plan, a preliminary plat, and then a final plat. So that's what you will typically see for a major subdivision. For a minor subdivision, anything that is less than 5 lots, you're going to often see it can go from a sketch plat to a final or come in as a final. You also have site plans that come in, and those are for existing lots that they're not changing any property boundaries for, and it's only for like building a building or adding an accessory structure. And for those, we're looking specifically at the zoning ordinance. And some site plans often come in as plot plans as well, just depends on how they're submitted. You also have plan U development, so those are plan documents, and typically, sometime, let me backtrack and say typically, often it's a subdivision plat and a site plan combined at the same time that gets reviewed. You'll also see rezoning requests come in, and some of the degree of information that is submitted depends on that, what they've already identified that they're wanting to do with the land. But what's important, when you consider rezoning is what you rezone to that zoning district, all those uses that are allowed or permitted by right, regardless of what the person comes in and tells you they're gonna do, that those are all the uses. So they could sell it the very next day and somebody else could do a different use that is permitted. So it's always important to remember as you're looking at rezoning of all the uses that are permitted by right. Yes.
On that, I don't remember what the term Rick used. I was talking to him. There's a rezoning that we can also do through the county commission that's project specific.
That's PUDs.
PUD. So that, say if someone comes in and they want an R3 for a particular, they want to do R3, but they want to do small single family homes. So they could actually come in and do a PUD for that. And if that project falls through, it reverts right back to its previous rezoning, which would have helped us with the property back on Melrose.
Can we change? Like somebody comes in and just presents something, can we make that a PUD or does the?
If it's permitted by right, they don't need to do a plan unit development. A plan unit development typically comes in when they're proposing like a mix of uses. So it's a mix of residential, commercial, and retail. It doesn't fit into a single zoning district. That's typically where you'll see a PUD come in.
What would you see in the place of that if you wanted to limit the restrictions and revert them back to the previous zoning? Is there such a term for that, or is it just
a timeline that they have to go by?
For a PUD?
No, for anything. If we,
Once it's rezoned, it's rezoned.
I was thinking of a project, a plat.
A plat, yeah, no, plat's not recorded. Then I'll have to double check, but it's typically if if an approved plat by this body has not been recorded within a certain amount of time, it's no longer valid and it has to come back to the planning commission. But for rezoning, once it's rezoned and approved by the county commissioners,
has to come back to get, if they don't do anything with it for like 5 years, don't they have to come back? Seems like we were told.
I don't know if it's 5 years, sometimes it's 2 years, it depends.
I remember for some reason 3 years is sticking out.
Well, the lady that was here before her told, I thought she said, because we had that one come in down there on 25, and I thought she said it was 5 years.
I think it depends on what type of plat was approved at that time.
Mm-hmm.
There's a different timeline for just a
preliminary and a final.
Okay.
Now, I do have a question. We have approved, because we were trying to maintain commercial along Highway 25, and there has been a development that was approved. They had a concept plan where they were going to do shops along 25 and then had like a little planned community behind it. And they came forward and it was approved, but nothing has been done since then. Now, is that?
Sounds like a PUD.
Depends on how it was approved. If it was approved as a PUD, or if it was or if it was approved as a preliminary versus a final. We can look into it, but it all depends.
At least a couple of years.
It has.
It was the same time as the one across the street was approved. That they came in at the same time, if I remember correctly.
Little Jean,
yeah.
When Little Jean.
Yep.
Well, I was referring to the gentleman that was going to do the cottages.
Yes, the property across the street from Little
He came
Jean's.
after.
Yeah, it was, but I was in, I thought the next month, he came in with his, because Carol came in and spoke on behalf of him.
Yeah.
That it was gonna be done that way or it wasn't gonna be sold to him. But yeah, I believe we did the same thing with him as we did across the street. Is they did a rezoning for commercial across the front part of the
Right.
property. And then the back, the rest of that 5 acres was residential. Yeah.
And I'm just thinking it's been at least 2 years.
Yeah.
Possibly 3. Okay.
Question, I guess, that I was just thinking of, kind of different topic, but is there a lock-in period for a rezoning? So say we rezone something to R1 and then that property owner sells that property, and the new property owner decides, hey, a month later, I want to rezone this to R2 or R3.
The whole process.
But is there a period of time that says it's locked in to R1 for X amount of months before it can be rezoned, or can it be rezoned as many times as?
It can be it. So I'll have to double check. I will look at your regulations. Sometimes if a rezoning is denied, they can't come back and submit the same request within a certain period of time, but I think it is, as I say, I'm almost positive it's a year if it's denied. Now, if it's approved, there is no like limitation on, I mean, obviously it would not be ideal to see the same property circling back, but yes, they could purchase the property and then apply for a lower or a higher density zone.
And only the owner of property can ask for it to be rezoned. Like you can't have, you're gonna sell yours to so-and-so if it gets so-and-so's gonna say, I'll buy it if it gets rezoned. But the owner has to answer for the rezoning, not the potential buyer. Right?
Yeah, the buyer can give the developer like the permission, grant the permission to represent.
Right.
Yes.
Just a question on that, because that's, ever since I've been in planning, that's always been stated. But when the state of Tennessee came through several years back, they just kind of randomly came down 25 and just started rezoning properties without the owner's permission
Or even knowledge.
on.
Didn't even know they were rezoned.
So if the owners are the only ones who can initiate, to me,
The city the jurisdiction can also initiate a rezoning.
so if we have say a tobacco warehouse burns down, it's industrial, it sits vacant for 2-3 years, can we, as the county, actually initiate rezoning of that property?
Okay.
Okay.
That would have been good information to know about 5 years ago.
Yep.
Clean up some of the industrial in the middle of residential.
Yeah, we had a couple of warehouses broke down. They sat there for years. Which is one I know.
In that situation, is that something that this committee would just bring up, or is that something
Well, probably you would
legislative
want to
body?
bring something like that up unless there's an idea as to what to do with it. If you're gonna rezone it to such and such, it's for a specific purpose, like future commercial property or something like that, you know?
But the owner can agree with it.
They can, so let me back up and answer your question, then I'll come to your question. So typically if the jurisdiction is going to request or seek a rezoning for a property that they don't own, it's going to be in line with like a long range plan that identifies a specific area for a targeted type of like development or investment. So they will oftentimes, the jurisdiction will seek the rezoning. Most often it occurs, like the request is sent to the property owners, it's done concurrently in agreement with that. Now, if it's against, there's the same, typically I would say most likely the elected body, legislative body will probably, depends if they're going to agree with the property owner or agree with the planning commission or staff, whatever initiated that rezoning request. But it's the same manner as this body makes a recommendation, it goes in front of the legislative body, has a public hearing and 2 readings. So it's on the responsibility lies on the elected body for that.
So in a particular case, down by the river, we've got a bunch of M1 that no one knew was even M1 till a few years ago, didn't even pay attention to it. Houses have been built on it, and one of the residents came, I believe, one of the residents came up wanting to refinance his house, and they're like, the bank told him, well, they couldn't refinance it because he was a residential on M1 zoning. He's like, industrial, I'm in the middle of nowhere, I'm agricultural. And I know we did a handful of those, but never did, and the question at that time was brought up, well, can we as a body go ahead and initiate and get all those cleaned up for our purposes instead of having to have each one of them come in as needed? Because there's still several of those properties that are in one down through there.
Yeah, so the county can, my recommendation would be to send like certified letters to all the property owners saying the county is interested in taking this action. Please contact us, or if people, you know, if we would like your support in doing this, if you have any questions. And then, but usually it's, the way it comes in front of the planning commission is Trousdale County Metro is requesting a rezoning with property owners, you know, acceptance or support.
Because when those that don't, if there's a death and heirs want to sell something, start with the, I'm gonna get a loan on something that's not zoned right. That's when it will come up.
We had that on Hilltop also.
Yeah.
When they made all those commercial, but none of that property has, I mean, it's a 20-foot bluff down to the road.
You know what I'm talking about? Across from that water tower.
I know where the water tower is. I can only imagine, you know, the response of like, hey, come visit our retail
like
shop.
somebody in
Take
Nashville.
like take a couple of stairs
Into a residential.
It's like somebody in Nashville said, oh, that's right on the highway. Then it should be commercial.
without looking at the topography.
Right.
They just pulled up the map and just started highlighting properties along 25.
Well, it's perfect. So, yes, so the government can initiate a rezoning. Special exceptions, conditional uses, those again go to the Board of Zoning Appeals. Those are not by right, but they are a listed special exception in the zoning ordinance based off the zoning district. Annexations, y'all don't really need to worry about that so much, being a metro.
Oh, I don't know.
We just had.
There's been talk before.
Really?
About the urban service area.
Oh, with the urban service boundary, but not.
Right.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, because we just expanded up Halltown, pushed that out Dalton Hollow, Zachary Taylor's property.
Annexed that, Zach and annexed and stuff.
Yeah, so it's all part of the urban now.
Okay. All right. Well, and then making any sort of amendments to approved plan. So let's say your major thoroughfare plan being in 1998, you wanted to amend it to update, instead of updating, you wanted to amend it, you hit this body can recommend. So again, the documents that are used in those review of those types of files or documents that are submitted are going to be your comp plan, your major thoroughfare plan, the subdivision regulations, your zoning resolution, and then if you have one, a design review manual, which y'all had started down the path of with the commercial, but won't go anywhere. All right.
Well, that being said though, we could still, well, I was thinking maybe that could still be included in the plan that we put together here, but it's not, it wouldn't be law until they approve it. But it's still something that we could have as a gathered work to go towards the plan and then present again.
It would be a part of a new plan, right?
Yeah, often the design review manual is primarily for like multifamily, commercial, industrial. Just adds an additional layer of the zoning ordinance when you're reviewing site plans. So you're looking at the building facades, the access, the lighting, where the garbage cans are going, where the loading and unloading dock are, any fences, landscaping. So it just goes into a little bit more finer grain detail than your zoning boards for those types of uses.
So I have a question. I know at one point we were, and this was what really prompted the commercial property design. So if somebody brings us a site plan and we see that they are building a commercial building, I heard that we could say, well, this is what we need to see as far as your building plans. And can this body say, we need to see what your building plans are going to be and ask them to have certain criteria, for instance, more brick? Or do we have to go exactly by what's in the ordinance and that's it?
You can only go by what's in the ordinance, because that's the adopted regulations. Now, if you were to adopt a design review manual that goes into more specifics on the materials, the way that the balance of the facade is, like the penetrations of windows and doors, and which, if it faces the street, doesn't face the street. The design review manual can go into that greater depth, but it has to be an adopted, recognized regulation.
Okay, what about access to a major thoroughfare? For instance, Highway 25. Could we have said, we need to see you have access off of 25 rather than a side street?
It depends on, so like if TDOT has any sort of access control or corridor management, theirs is gonna take precedence over local control. And most often with a highway, an arterial street or road like that, they're gonna wanna see the access off of a secondary street and not on a highway.
Okay.
But you can require additional access control within the design review, but primarily right now that sits in your subdivision regulation.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And I would say Dollar General did a good job.
They did. We haven't had near the problems with the semi trucks going in and out as people thought.
They enlarged their turn-in area and stuff, and then they paved it all real well and stuff. I've never noticed an issue.
They are starting, if you're turning towards town, they are creating a hole right there at that where the two roads meet. That maybe I talk with the superintendent of roads and see if we can get how to get that.
Oh, like that apron isn't wide
Yeah.
enough.
Because it wasn't meant for semis to come in and out of there.
Is it on the local road side or on the state road side? Or probably some of
It's
both.
right at the intersection. It's just that corner.
That sounds to me like it's gonna be one of those things, it ain't me, that's.
Yeah.
I guess that's a state.
Could be the apron of
Right.
the local road.
That just sounds like a perfect, that ain't man.
Well, we've got enough problems with that road as it is. I haven't really ventured off that anymore.
All right, so let me see if we're right at 30 minutes, so I'm gonna keep going at least until I get through subdivision zoning. Does that sound good?
Sure.
Okay. Well, by that time I'll be through, so we'll just power through, y'all, if you're okay with that. So subdivision regulations, so Tennessee Code Annotated gives local governments through the Planning Commission the authority to adopt and enforce zoning regulations. So the code references are 13-4-203 and 13-3-403. And really the purpose, this is quoted directly from Tennessee Code Annotated, harmonious development of the jurisdictions and environs for the coordination of streets with other existing or planned streets for adequate open spaces for traffic, recreation, light, and air, and for the planned distribution of population and traffic, which will tend to create conditions favorable to the public's health, safety, convenience, and prosperity. Again, it goes back to those police powers of health, safety, welfare, and morals, which is where the power for land development review and planning commission get their power through the state code. So what is a subdivision in the state? So Tennessee Code Annotated gives us a definition. Again, where you can find those are 402 and 302. So a subdivision is dividing a tract or parcel into 2 or more lot sites or other divisions requiring new street or utility construction, or any division of 5 or few acres for sale or building development. And what's important to remember here, or take note of, is utility construction does not include the extension of a utility for an individual parcel. So if it's a single lot that is extending water, electrical, sewer, it is not considered a subdivision. And if it's over 5 acres, it's not considered a subdivision. If it has access to a public right of way and it's not extending utilities. So what are subdivision regulations? They set the procedures and development standards for how land is subdivided in the city and the county. And this includes the requirements for the design, the suitability of the land, streets and alleys, lot layouts, and any easements that are granted for access or utilities or drainage. Subdivision regulations also provide the infrastructure requirements such as the water supply lines that are needed, so 4-inch, 6-inch, 8-inch. Any sort of requirements for sanitary sewerage, if it's available. Most, I think even y'all require it if it's available. You are required to hook up versus having your own septic system. Stormwater management, how water is released or flows off of the property. That's also within the subdivision regulations requirements. Access to fire hydrants. So as he mentioned earlier, those lots will not have access to a fire hydrant because it's not on a 6-inch line, it's on a 4-inch line, you can't get a fire hydrant there. Any sort of right-of-way dedication. So when new streets are proposed, typically you're going to request a right-of-way dedication for those new streets. Any sort of street lighting, underground utilities, park improvements, and landscaping. Those are all can be found within your subdivision regulations. It sets the process and the requirements for those approvals. So again, as I mentioned, for major subdivisions, you have a 3-step process here in the county, and then for minor, it's really typically about a 1 or a 2-step process for plat approval. It sets the design standards, again, that must be provided on those plats in relation to lot requirements. So the width of the lot at the street, the building setbacks, the lot lines, so width to depth ratios, all those things that y'all have heard through your course here, and streets and access. So again, mention the process for major and minor subdivisions. I won't go through that again unless there's a question. As you saw last night or tonight, we had a sketch plat. The next step for him will be the preliminary plat, and then there'll be the final plat. So that's why he said, well, he'll see us all for the next 2 months, most likely, it sounds like, to get through that. And again, the subdivision regulation, that is this body's document. It's adopted by this document or by this body, and you have the authority to grant variances to the subdivision regulations. Now we're moving and shifting to the zoning ordinance. The zoning ordinance is adopted by the elected body, and any sort of rezoning or variance rezoning goes, you make a recommendation, it goes to the elected body. If there's a variance request or a special exception, it goes to the Board of Zoning Appeals. But again, similar to the subdivision regulations, how the authority for a zoning resolution, it's again through the TCA with the direct links of Tennessee Code Annotated 13-7-201 to regulate the location, height, bulk, number of stories, and size of buildings and other structures, the percentage of a lot that may be occupied, the size of yards, courts, and other open spaces, the density of population, and the uses of building structures and land for trade, industry, residence, recreation, public activities, and other purposes, and to establish special districts or zones subject to seasonal or periodic flooding, and such regulations may be applied therein as will minimize dangers to life and property. So this is where your floodplain regulations come into play. So the zoning resolution, again, it's a similar document. It's a tool to recognize that long-range vision for how development and where development and the type of development goes. It's a legislative method of controlling that land use by regulating considerations such as the type of the building or the use that may be erected and the density of those uses. It's accomplished by dividing land into zoning districts and each having specific conditions under which land and buildings may be legally developed and used. The zoning resolution has two components. It has the text and it has a map, and you can amend either one. So when rezonings come in, you are amending the map. When you amend the text, if you want to change the building setbacks for a district, you are amending the ordinance. So, all right. And then the last section, questions consider as you're making decisions or recommendations. What is the current land use? Knowing what's there existing, what are the surrounding land uses and surrounding properties? Do the adopted plans identify a future preferred land use or development pattern? What are the availability of utilities and infrastructure, both current and proposed? And this includes water, sewer, transportation, the road network. Impacts relative to traffic. Does the thoroughfare plan identify any upcoming improvements or expansions of the road network? You can also ask for traffic impact studies if it's a significant development to understand what is the additional daily trips that are going to be generated by this use, whether it be residential or commercial or industrial. If it's adjacent to a neighboring jurisdiction, what are its plans for zoning or service provisions and other impacts that should be considered? Are there any concerns from the community? Is there clarity and correctness when you are looking for changing or amending a use or recommending a rezoning? And then also thinking, what additional information do you need to be able to make an informed decision, and who do you need that information from? So these are some questions that you can use as you're considering requests in front of this body for making either a recommendation for rezoning or approving subdivision plans. That's
Any questions?
finish my training for tonight.
So instead of a 30-minute one, we had a 45.
Yeah.
Any questions?
Question that I'm not really sure what way to take it, and so you will bear with me for a second. I know there's some neighboring communities that are concerned about some zoning, not within this county, but just to clarify that there's some zoning that has been approved for certain areas. It was for a high density family development. The initial owner came in and I'm going to change the numbers up so nobody totally figures it out, but say it's 45, say it's 45 homes that they're on this spot. Then COVID hits, it doesn't build, someone else buys it. Well, now almost double the amount of homes. But that's what it was legally zoned to be. It's just it was won and sold over and swayed to have it be this zoning based on maybe one or two little tweaks that made it compatible for it to work instead of an SP. So now I'm starting to hear some of these communities are starting to change where, okay, we don't want that 80-something development there. We don't have the infrastructure. And I will speak on behalf of this county. We don't have the infrastructure to end up like Lebanon with a whole lot of apartments or the growth that some of our neighboring communities don't have capacity yet. So what I overheard in a couple of conversations is they're trying to make it where, okay, if one person doesn't build it, then it goes back to. So I know you're going to do a little bit of research. So if you see or hear of anything where law is made that it goes back to the previous zoning, if that initial group comes in, you'll let us know, because that's.
Well, I can answer that.
I'm not sure how that's going to go, and I'm not sure it's going.
Yeah, I can answer that. So it goes back to the PUD. If it's a rezoning, and if it's a straight rezoning from an R2 to an R3, and an R3 is by right, that's why I say whenever you look at a rezoning, you have to consider not just what they're proposing to you today, but all uses into the future. But once you rezone, that is permanent. unless somebody requested it. There's no revision or
So
reverting.
can the court change it, so in the future?
No.
So the
The
court
only, well, the jurisdiction could initiate a rezoning. That would be the only way. But it doesn't revert if that property owner or developer doesn't do what they said they were gonna do.
So that city or county would have to try to change the zoning, and then obviously a judge somewhere would rule in favor of either the owner of the property or the jurisdiction trying to change it. Resolution's gonna probably go,
Yeah.
gonna wind up in court.
So and you typically want to have very solid rationale to do that, which you need a long-range plan that shows when you wouldn't have probably recommended the rezoning if it didn't align. So for the jurisdiction to go back and say, we're going to revert, we would like to downzone this because of, they're going to have to make a very solid case for that reason.
It doesn't fit our major plan.
It would have to be a utility, probably, restriction that they don't have the capacity to serve. Not a plan at that
It would have to
point.
be justified. You would have to hold a justification.
But now if you did it as a PUD, that is where the land will revert after a specific amount of time and nothing occurs. Then they would have to come back to request an extension or an amendment or a change or a modification. That is the only policy tool that will allow a rezoning, but then revert it back to its original, if not.
So like when this new road gets done in 3 years, hopefully, and somebody buys some property and wants to put in some sort of commercial property, if we don't have the existing infrastructure out there, we could turn that down. This body could turn that down based on lack of infrastructure already existing.
Mm-hmm. Like if there's a restriction on your sewer capacity or an ability to serve, the utility can not sign the plat or sign the site plan because there isn't the ability to serve.
And that's where the signing that plat really gets important is, because we wouldn't know that probably until it got for Tommy to sign the plat from the utility area or Mr. Scruggs from the road part and stuff. They have to pay attention. Tommy probably does. I'm not sure about everybody else.
As far as the HUD goes, what's the incentive from the developer to initiate a PUD versus just a rezoning?
So for Trousdale, you don't have like a mixed use type of development that allows residential, commercial, retail. So often a PUD is going to allow for a mix of uses that provides more flexibility. But it also oftentimes, depending on if it's a special case, like in cottages, or I've seen it done for recently, like an RV park that they're actually selling lots for and renting lots. So PUDs are special circumstances that provide flexibility out, like beyond the strict standards.
So like you could have commercial property, you could have apartments, and you could have single family homes in one
development.
Right.
So what actually the conversation I had with Rick Gregory, that even brought this up because I didn't know anything about it, but and he happened to bring it up was the property out on Melrose behind First Baptist Church there, that 10 acres that they came in doing originally. The owners wanted to do single family homes, and because of our zoning regs, instead of being able to get it all done in R2, if we could give them R3, they could get one more single family home in there. And so we said, that's fine. That's great. So we recommended R3. County court does R3. They sell the property off, and now the next buyers are talking about doing townhomes. And instead of 34 homes or 36 homes, it jumped up 80 homes. And we would have never approved an 80 home development there because of utilities and road infrastructure there. So in a PUD situation, we could actually, if we'd have known about it, we could have proposed that and said, okay, we'll do R3 in this scenario, allowing for single-family homes, county court could take that and say, yes, if that's what you want to do as R3, then that's fine. And that would have kept apartments or townhomes doubling that population, because now it's R3 and it's 10 acres. They can put apartments in there and have even more than, 80.
Are they still
units.
planning on building?
I haven't heard anything else from it. The last I heard was,
It's sold.
They've sold it again.
Yes, sir.
is that the property itself isn't what they thought it was. That's why the first developer, when he ran into the engineering issues of the water runoff and other issues.
Back down on 25, on his left, he got a problem. He buys property, he gets it all done, and sells it. And then now he hadn't been able to find anybody anyway.
Yeah.
It's gonna,
Yeah.
I can see a
especially
development
with that stream and stuff up here.
utilizing that
Yeah.
when they're trying to get.
Almost cutting the tract in half.
Exactly.
And I warned him about that when he brought it in.
Yeah.
And
It's, I guess, just to add to that, do we have the authority to suggest that they go with a PUD versus?
You have no mechanism in your zoning ordinance to offer a PUD right now.
So they
The
have.
only thing we can do is say, we're not gonna pass it unless you change it to a PUD.
Well, you have to offer a PUD process.
I just offered one. I can say it was legal.
So they couldn't bring a proposal of a PUD under state regulation?
No, it has to be here, like you have has to be adopted with.
What we'd have to do is turn it down and then outside say, look at it.
Trying to explain that to the commission, this would be a huge amount.
It's in that instance, is it something that we should dive into to potentially create an option?
So there's a couple of options. You can do a plan unit development, and a lot of places do use those as the flexibility, or you can look at overlay zones, which people can apply for. It operates similarly to a PUD with a few differences. And that you can apply, you can create some overlay zone districts that then are floating and then can be applied.
When you're talking about the overlay, is that kind of, I guess the example I'm thinking of would be the South Hartman corridor in Wilson County in Lebanon?
I'm not familiar enough with that to answer.
And
Is that,
I heartily suggest anybody wanting the county commission to do that, you be willing to go speak and explain to them what a PUD is. I'd like to hear that conversation.
I would love to hear that conversation.
Make it.
What about state? You don't have there's no modification in the.
When you say SPUs, are you meaning special permit?
Special variances or something,
Those are typically done through Board of Zoning Appeals, and
I know that's not our jurisdiction, but I was just curious.
Those are special exceptions or conditional uses, and they can apply, the Board of Zoning Appeals can apply conditions to those approvals, that within the bounds of kind of some of the development standards. And that does tie to all future developments, with those special exceptions.
Yeah, but if it's an R3, it's an R3.
Correct,
Even
unless
with-
they ask for a variant, like if they were to come in and ask for a variance to R3 for, don't take me, because I don't know if it's allowed or not. Let's just say they want to do it's currently an R3, and within that use is a wedding venue, because we've seen a couple of those. Since it's not a permitted use, but it's a authorized special exception as a community facility, or however we define it, they can go to the Board of Zoning Appeals. Board of Zoning Appeals can say, yes, we're gonna authorize you or grant you permission to conduct a wedding venue here in the R3 as a special exception.
That being said, could you do an R2 zoning with, and then the BZA give the special exception to allow some of the R3 setbacks?
It's a case by case basis.
We try to find a way that we could get the benefits of a PUD without having to create a PUD.
We do have in our county,
I guess I'll stay
zoning
on
restriction here, the cluster residential development.
Yeah,
What is that?
so it allows for like smaller lot. It's basically like a conservation subdivision, so you can do smaller lots in the for the purpose of preserving a protected or natural resource area.
Like a large pond or.
Or let's say it's a crop of rock, and there's only a couple of buildable sites, so you can get some smaller lots on, but the developer is willing to protect that remaining unbuildable area into permanent open space. It allows you.
In order to protect the rock.
Yeah.
But now those are only allowed in the county, correct?
And they're only for residential, yeah.
All right, guys, anybody else got anything? Appreciate everybody staying. Heather, I did have one question, water question. Is the new water tank about ready to go live or?
No, not quite. I will get an update tomorrow, but we have been waiting for our vendors.
I just wondered.
Not quite. We're almost there.
Okay.
So the tower itself, I mean, the tank is done and.
The tank is installed. We're waiting on a service.
Okay. Yeah. Somebody had asked me, I said, I tried to find it.
It's beautiful. It's a big piece of concrete.
It's a whole lot of water.
Program, thing, a big TC on it, or something. I mean, you can, coming in on 141, I mean, maybe some sort of nice thing, you know. We're just put Yankees go home. Yes, I can.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second. See ya.